And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. It's that time of the evening, it's 7 o'clock, and we are kicking off the series. Of course, after our program, you have Sherrod Duncan and Mark Benchop at 9 o'clock. So we are taking the new ball as usual. You can call us Conrad Hunt, you can call us Gordon Greenidge, you can call us Desmond Haynes, to name the ones that we know very well who take the new ball. We'll take any of that. Of course, you Guyanese will say, why do you leave out Roy Fredericks? Roy Fredericks, who is obviously our best opening batsman ever. Welcome to all of you. You're joining us from Guyana, or you're joining us from outside of Guyana. Welcome. You join us from our Caribbean. I don't consider the Caribbean as the diaspora, so it's our Caribbean. Welcome to you. Yes, some of you have noticed my flack since yesterday. I've been persuaded that I have to get very patriotic, that I have to have the Guyanese flag, to fly the Guyanese flag. So yes, somebody gave me it as a gift for Politics 101, hence our flag in the background. Those of you joining us from England, welcome. It's night there, good night. And you know, we really have to give you all a medal, because you know it's 11 at night, and you all stay up every night to view our program. Good evening, Debbie. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, Miss Hanover. Mr. Henry, welcome to Politics 101. I may not see some of it tonight because, you know, I went to do a little checkup, post-surgery checkup on the eye today, and they dilate. Those of you who know the eye story, they dilate the eye so I can't see properly. Yet the vision has not come back on, but the show goes on. The show goes on. They say if you can't see, you feel. Good evening to my brother Thomas Robertson out there in Atlanta, Georgia. You all doing it there with the Trump trial and so on. All wonderful people there in Georgia. Georgia, welcome to Politics 101. Please share the link. Tonight is a big show. We are stepping outside of Guyana a little bit tonight, as we must. We are part of a world. We are part of a region. We are part of a hemisphere. We are part of humanity. And what's going on there in Gaza concerns us. There was a letter in I think 2 days ago by Rohit Kanhai, saying that the Gaza problem should be our problem. We Guyanese should embrace it just as we embrace our problem. And Rohit Kanhai is going to be on the panel tonight. We're going to heavyweights. We're going to have Professor Clive Thomas. We're going to have Gerald Pereira and former President Donald Ramotar. So big show tonight. Lynette Greenwood, my family, my Congo sister. Good evening, and good evening to all the Congo people that come out from Congo pasture. Annandale, as we say in that part of the country, we say Annandale. Good evening, Lynette. And I was talking to him this weekend with George, my brother. You know, we were catching up and so on. And I was telling him that when we see the fancy name, he said, yes, that's your fancy name. That's your fancy name. Annandale people, good people. Congo, they say Congo High Nation, me pick me. Congo High Nation. Welcome to you, Mr. Thom. I see Maryland in the house. You know, the tragedy there on that bridge at Baltimore, quite something. I know that bridge well because that's one of my homes there in Maryland. And if you're from Maryland, you know that bridge quite well, quite a tragedy. Our hearts, our prayers go out to the people there in Baltimore, a port city. Baltimore is a port city, you know. It's one of the oldest cities. They used to traffic a lot in slaves there. Hence the strong black population in Baltimore. All of those who are in New York, whether you're in Brooklyn or Queens or the Bronx, upstate New York, I know you got to talk about Long Island, because people move out far. There used to be some people upstate, like Rohit Kanhai, and now he moved from upstate and he gone in Long Island. In them days, Long Island was the Ustad place, the bourgeois place, as the communists like Donald Ramotar would say, the bougie, the young people say now, used to live out in Long Island, but now either everybody become bougie or Long Island is no longer the bougie place. Welcome to Politics 101. We're going to be talking about what's going on in Gaza. We're talking about what's going on in Gaza there. That tragedy continues. And as I've been saying on this program every night, we have always been part of the world because we were part of empire. We were part of the empire, and as part of the empire, we had a sense of what was going on in all parts of the world where the British Empire was, whether it was in Africa or Asia or wherever. We had a sense of empire. We've always been a global people, an international people. And so therefore, what goes on in the rest of the world is important for us. And of course, if you thought that we were no longer international, you just look at who were visiting recently. I was looking at broadcast TV today, and Bill Clinton and Obama and they're in New York trying to prop up Brother Biden, who was lost this way, partly because of this Gaza story. But Bill Clinton is there, and they were talking, Bill Clinton just got back from an overseas trip to Guyana. And I said, here my country. There's some of them saying Guyana. But Bill Clinton just got back from Guyana, and the American spy chief just passed through Guyana. And who else? The French foreign minister was just there. I'm sure Comrade Donald would have been glad when he was president if you had all them big shot people that passing through. But it says where our country is. And we cannot continue to deny that because of the island gas story, our country is now in the big league. And we're going to have several visits like that. And if we're in the big league, we got to act like big league people. We got to be informed of what's happening in the rest of the world. Last night, I got my days mixed up. I thought yesterday was Thursday, so I said Apostle London was going to be on tonight with Vincent Adams, but they're on tomorrow night, Friday night. And I know some of you, like me, didn't realize it's Easter upon we. Today's Holy Thursday. Already, but it's leap year, so everything come early this year. Pagua come early. I don't ever remember Pagua coming before Easter. Pagua come early this year. So everything come early because of the leap year. So we are moving into the Easter weekend, Holy Thursday. The cross buns, you all start making them already. Grandma, who usually make cross buns here in Arizona where I am, she's not feeling too well, but we are imposing on her that she got to make cross buns. So keeping our fingers crossed that we'll have cross buns tomorrow. Happy Easter as we move into the Easter weekend, but even Easter cannot stop the program from going on. So we're going to be on today, and tomorrow night we're going to be on all this Good Friday. Good Friday, you stay home during the day, but you are allowed after 6 o'clock. So our program is 7 o'clock. So we will not be violating violating the Good Friday story. Big program tonight, big cast. Professor Clive Thomas, Rohit Kanhai, President Donald Ramotar, and our Pan-Africanist, Gerald Pereira. They're ready and raring to go. My friend Kwesi Ojinga, those of you who've been around T8 and so on. Lynette, your cousin-in-law, Kwesi. Kwesi, when Kwesi put in on a play, he used to get 30, 40 people. Kwesi, why he said by me like big cast. So we're having a big cast tonight on Politics 101. Let's go. We are ready to roll. Let's bring in the cast. They're ready. Let's see here. Rohit Kanhai, WPA Exco member. Professor Clive Thomas, who needs no introduction. You got to call about 10 things if you're talking about Professor Clive Thomas. President Ramotar, who, among other things, but you know, a president is a president. And once you are president, you always are a president. And the Pan-Africanist, Gerald Pereira. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening, David, and the audience.
Good evening, David.
A
Good evening.
month ago, we had our first program, and it seemed to have attracted some attention because I got a call from our sister at the university who said that they want us to do a webinar. I know, Gerald, you were up there at the university speaking to the students, but they want us to do a webinar based on this program, and so working with the sister to organize it, so that so our program attracted some attention the last time, and so we are following up. We had a resolution at the United Nations after several attempts and all of that. They finally got a resolution, and so I want to know what you all make of that resolution. Rohit, let me start with you, because that's your bread and butter. You wake up in the morning, you go to sleep at night, you're on top of that Gaza thing. What do you think of the resolution? Has it moved the situation forward in any positive way?
It seems as if the resolution is now a source of controversy. The American representative claimed it was non-binding. The Palestinian representative claimed it was binding, that the Security Council represents the highest forum for international law. So we are now left to sort out which is which. And it has no force, material force, more of a moral force. So it will tell us how immoral or moral we are. And given the fact that the UN rapporteur in her presentation made a compelling case that there is genocide taking place in Gaza as we speak, the importance of that ceasefire is even more compelling. When is this slaughter going to stop instead of just being debated? So that's where we are right now.
President Ramotar, as president, you would have had to contend with the United Nations and resolutions and so forth. What's the importance of these resolutions, and in particular this resolution? Does it have any impact on what's happening there in Gaza?
I think this resolution is very important. As far as my understanding goes, all decisions of the Security Council are binding. The fact that the Americans are now saying that it's non-binding, it's an attempt to undermine the resolution. I think they abstained from voting for it, and it passed. That means that it is binding. I think that they abstained because they found themselves in very isolated internationally at the UN itself, at the Security Council. I think, I don't know, you would probably recall, I don't know if you listened, Guyana's representative, Carlin Rodriguez, made a very strong and compelling argument about the why the Guyana abstained from voting with the Americans on the issue, and demanded that we have a ceasefire. So this resolution is binding, but another something else is happening in our world, and that is there is a definite attempt, a deliberate attempt to discredit international institutions. Not only and now they have gone as far as to the Security Council to try to discredit the Security Council and make it not what it's supposed to be, to ensure that a lot of the decisions are carried out. But the Americans have been defending Israel a long time. Israel has violated a lot of decisions of the United Nations Security Council, and they are the only country who seems to be getting away with that, largely because of the position of the United States. You will recall, with less than that kind of decision, the American attacked Iraq, they attacked Libya, they destroyed those countries, and with less than that, claiming that they had decisions of the United Nations Security Council. And now that you have a decision of the United Nations Security Council on the slaughter that is taking place in the Gaza, and it continues, Israel violating all the decisions that have been taken, either by the ICJ, that ordered them to take some measures to ease the humanitarian crisis, and now the Security Council itself taking a decision demanding a ceasefire, that that they are allowed to continue. And while the Americans abstained and allowed this resolution to pass, they continue to provide Israel with the weapons, the bombs, and the guns and the bullets to kill Palestinians. And so far, but almost 33,000 Palestinians are dead. And according to the United Nations rapporteur, a few other thousands are under the rubble. So the death toll is way beyond the 33,000 that we think. And the injured, as almost 75,000 people have been injured. So it is very, very clear that this is an attempt at genocide. They're targeting population. They're killing young women of childbearing age. They're killing babies. They're using food as a weapon of starvation. They're bombing hospitals to ensure that people die from their injuries. Those who don't die immediately from the bombing. Those who are not lucky enough to die from their injuries immediately after they bomb them, that they will have a slow death in the Gaza. So very clear to me that this is total genocide that is taking place. And it is not only Israel that is guilty, it is the whole, what is being called of the whole collective West on this matter, those who are providing the weapons for Israel to continue the massacre that is taking place.
Professor Thomas, can you weigh in on the resolution and what impact or lack of impact it would have on the situation, and also Guyana's stance, because we are Guyanese, and obviously our role there in the Security Council, shared Security Council, comes under scrutiny, and of course we should be interested in that. So we'll take you, and then we'll go to Gerald.
Okay, thank you, David. My comments substantially follow what the past president has said. I agree entirely with what he has presented so far. I believe also that there is no such thing as a non-binding decision of the Security Council. All decisions are binding. What they might lack is the force that is necessary to make them be put into effect. That has always been a problem between the authority of the Security Council and its capacity to make whatever it decides be made into effect without its support and the voluntary contribution, more or less, of the members affected by the decision. That's the first point I want to make very clear. So to me, there's no such thing as a non-binding Security Council resolution. Second, I think that Guyana must be commended for taking what I thought was a pretty brave stand in standing up against the American attempt to kerfuffle the world by putting forward what they call a resolution that is supposed to be a ceasefire resolution that was nothing but a cover for this treachery with Israel. I think those two things stand out to me, and I think that we should take note of them. Thirdly, I think that the extent to which Biden is prepared to go to support Israel is completely unacceptable. I never expected it, and that is a complete misjudgment on my part. I never thought I could see the US bowing to the pressure of Israel, and that has definitely surprised me. I don't think there's a way out for him. I think he's hoping to come back in the elections, but he's already lost the election. And a lot of that has to do with his moral failure at this particular moment and the way in which he's presenting himself to an electorate now facing the threat of a Trump coming in. Because to my mind, there is a greater danger, and that danger is Trump. But I think that we have to let the contradictions, as my friend Roy would say, play themselves out, because now I would never support or recommend anybody do anything in support of Biden, because it's a total moral failure. So badly he has come. And that would be my additions to what has been said. But basically, I support everything that he has said. I think we should commend the government, mainly to give them the backbone to stand up to the Americans. I think it's not unsurprising that we've had all these visits that we talked about in the beginning. And I think it's a recognition that more is at stake. I don't know quite what more. More is at stake than is apparent at the surface. I think these visits represent a deeper significance, which I can't put my fingers on yet. I'll be quite honest with you, but they are surprising in the nature of their coverage. From the CIA chief to a past president coming in with by country support mechanism that everybody's talking about around the world through the Dominican Republic to Guyana is something that is completely unusual. But I have not been able to sort out in my mind what could be the motivating forces behind it. I was hoping I would learn something about that today.
Ramotar was in the engine room at one time. He may be able to give us some perspective. So when we come back to him, we'll ask him to comment.
I didn't want to put such a perspective.
Gerald, the resolution, its significance, Guyana's stance, and the flurry of visits that we've had.
Yeah, well, I agree with all the what is said by the previous speakers, that the decision of the Security Council is always binding. That's clear. And Guyana must be commended. But at the same time that Guyana took this position, we've seen, as you mentioned, this flurry of visits and so. I see the French are here. The French, for the first time, will be setting up an embassy. It's the first time that the director of the CIA ever came to a CARICOM country. Tony Blair was here. The Blair promoting the Blair Global Institute, or the Institute for Global Change, and Bill Clinton was here. And of course, before that, a couple of weeks before, you had, I think 2 weeks before, you had the U.S. Representative, Ambassador Thoms was here. Well, we were out there. A number of us were demonstrated in front of the cultural center.
And then Blinken was here a couple of months ago.
Yes. Well,
Okay,
Tony Blair, this is, we were seeing what, international law, what is called international law applies only to certain countries and the countries of the global south. Israel has a track record of ignoring international bodies. For example, the International Atomic Energy Agency was never allowed to enter Israel to check to see whether they have nuclear weapons or not. And they went into Iraq, and Scott Ritter said that there was no weapon of mass destruction in Iraq, and they did not give the Iraqis the time to provide everything, and so on, and they went in and destroyed that country. You impose a no-fly zone on Iraq, as President Ramotar pointed out. You imposed a no-fly zone on Libya, and before those two countries, what you did in those two countries, what you did in former Yugoslavia, where there was, you claimed that it was the Serbs were carrying out ethnic cleansing of the ethnic Albanians, and you intervened and you bombed the hell out of the country, and that was under Clinton. And Israel actually tells the International Court of Justice to hell with you. So if Israel, this is going to complicate things, because if Israel can say that and get away with it, then why should Maduro next door listen to the international CJ? He can say, well, talk to Israel. This is double standards. And while all of this is happening, you have Bill Clinton came in, and this is the man people forget, who played a very destructive role in Haiti. When they invaded that country and removed Aristide, the democratically and popularly elected president, and put him on a plane and sent him into exile. And Clinton walked in here. War criminal Tony Blair came in here. And it was like business as usual.
Well, there was some picketing of Clinton by a couple of...
Yes.
Were you? I assume you were out there.
No, we didn't get there because of the time. And I think what happened is they said that they could only have a certain amount, which is the first time I'm hearing that. And if you had more than X amount of people, you would have had to get police permission. I know police permission is only for if you're marching through the streets. We've participated in demonstration over the year and never had police permission. We just showed up at the embassy. But Guyana must be commended. But at the same time, with all of this, you're seeing the contradictions too. I mean, the French are here, and the French are getting us to buy patrol boats, and I guess the U.S. is going to apply pressure on us to spend money from the oil and gas, the oil and gas money to buy weapons. And while all of that is happening, we also have some people who are calling for a military base, to the Americans to establish a military base in Guyana.
There we have on the screen the demonstration yesterday by some civil society groups. I seem to have lost one or two of my panels because I might be overloading the system. But there was a demonstration, and Comrade Pereira is saying that that they limited the number of people who could demonstrate out there. I'd never heard of that myself.
Yeah, it was unheard of.
Yes. Rohit, let me bring you back in. And I want you to address the Guyana stance at the United Nations, and also address your thoughts on the flurry of visits that we have seen from overseas people. And then we'll go to President Ramotar.
David, the Guyana stance has to be commended for one particular reason. The representative pointed out the distinction between an unconditional ceasefire and the ceasefire linked to the release of hostages. And she pointed out very clearly that the two things were not linked, that the ceasefire was unconditional, ceasefire, period, that it was not tied to hostage release. Now, what the Americans did subsequently is to tie the two things, saying one was conditional upon the other. Furthermore, the Guyana representative also pointed out that the UN resolution was the operative resolution, not the talks being held, that one was not conditional upon the other. Now, that was a very fundamental and important distinction. The Americans reversed it. They are saying that, look, the talks that are being held is the final issue, not the ceasefire resolution. Now, what all this is pointing to is the Rafah invasion. And this, for me, is the issue that will define what humanity is. If that Rafah invasion is allowed to go through it, I think humanity will have to begin afresh. There is no way that event can take place.
Rohit Kanhai, executive member of the WPA there, saying the Rafah intervention will spell further disaster for humanity, for the world. President Ramotar, you have been calling for our government, for regional governments, to take a stronger stance in relation to what's happening there in Gaza. You're not part of the government, but you are a member of the party in government. Have they heard you?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. Because I know as much as what is taking place from the news media as well, and I will only be able to speculate on some of the visits that you were talking about. But obviously, they're more in the matter than in the pestle, because I think the very fact that the CIA man was here, I don't know if he was here. That one of the speculation that I have, that he was probably here to try to wring the government's hand to not to allow our representative at the UN to vote the way she voted. That they wanted everybody to vote with them. And Guyana stands out for another reason, that it's the only, apart from Algeria, that voted with Russia and China against the resolution. Guyana is the only country of all the other nominated, not permanent members of the Security Council, that abstained and took a very and that made their position even more outstanding of what they did. And that, as I said, as everyone said, is complimented, because I think in the speech of Caroline Rodriguez, she really ripped the mask off the Americans' position completely and showed their double standard and their hypocrisy. But now, moving away from that, I will say that that there's another issue that we have to look at. In the past, the Americans could have clicked their fingers and stopped Israel. Up to the last war that they had, the last attack that they had on the Gaza in early in this century, they just made a telephone call and said, time to stop. And it was stopped. Before that, Reagan in the 1980s called and said, stop this, and it was stopped. But this time we've seen Netanyahu violating, standing up against the Americans in many, many areas.
What has changed? What has changed, Donald?
What in my mind has changed is the influence of Israel, that Israel has on the U.S. government itself through AIPAC. The Congress itself is most congressmen from both sides, both parties that dominate the Congress, both depend on AIPAC to have them elected. And in the executive, if you examine the State Department of the United States, it seems to me that AIPAC had a very big influence on the appointments, including Nuland, who seems to have been dismissed recently. That's for another matter, I understand. It looks like she was going too far on the Russia question. But all of those, including Blinken, they all seem to have, the AIPAC seems to have had a very big influence on their appointment. And now, even if Biden wants now to save himself because he's facing an election and wants to call off the dog seems to be controlling. The tail seems to be wagging the dog at this point in time, and it is very interesting actually to look at the dynamics that is taking place, because for the first time it seems to me that the American government seems to be controlled by an outside government, and who they're telling them go to hell. I see that the Americans are trying to stiffen their resistance to Israel, and one sign that they seem to be getting tough, and probably it reflects some type of division in the Israeli side, is that when the Americans abstained from the vote at the Security Council, Netanyahu withdrew a delegation that was supposed to go to the United States to talk about the Rafah situation, and publicly he said that he was not going, and he was going to attack Rafah. But today I heard that they are reconsidering and fixing another date for them to visit with a delegation to the United States. Another interesting factor is, while Netanyahu was saying this, his defense minister was in the United States having talks with the U.S. government, and what that seems to be reflecting some type of division in the Israeli government. And another factor that I think our viewers should keep in mind of what is happening is a kind of a selfish position on the part of Netanyahu. Netanyahu has been charged and I think found guilty by the court of corruption in Israel. And as soon as he's out of government, he is likely to go to jail. And therefore, it seems to me that he has a personal interest as well, apart from the position of a lot of the hawks in the Israeli government. But he also has a personal interest in keeping this war going, because the longer this war goes, the longer he will stay in power and the longer he will stay out of prison. And while he's probably hoping that because of the war, he might regain some type of popularity, but his popularity seems to be going down all the time. So I would say that the situation is at a very important juncture at this point in time to see what will happen. If they go on with this slaughter that will take place in Rafah, then I think they will lose all the credibility that they have, and there'd be absolutely no question about their genocidal intention in attacking Rafah, where they sent the people for safe. They sent people there saying that you will be safe there, and now they're planning a massive ground offensive against these people. This is the worst type of criminals that you can. This is fascism, naked fascism, that is actually taking place in Israel. I don't think I could be contradicted in saying that this is fascism that is taking place right now.
Fascism that is taking place right now. Professor Thomas, as we bring you back in, President Ramotar has said it is naked fascism that is happening there. And of course, there are lessons there for us here in the Caribbean, in Guyana. We can't have a panel like this and not have you all weigh in on the United Nations Human Rights Committee hearing at which Guyana was in the hot seat, because I think once we're talking about fascism in that part of the world, the rest of the world has to be very careful that we do not descend into that area. The significance of the UN Human Rights Committee hearings, Professor Thomas.
Well, I think that's significant, Sam. I'll discuss in a moment. But I prefer to, at this juncture, make the observation, which I think has not really been made so far, that we should not discount the potential role of Trump in this process. Trump has given all evidence that he would be a major butcher, and that Biden's butchery pales in significance with the attitude he's taking towards the Gazans. He is completely offhand. He's saying the Israelis should finish the job. He makes no bones about it. And I think that dynamic is being exploited by Netanyahu. As he pursues his private ambition, he realizes that he can play Trump against Biden, and that his actions are likely to lead to the defeat of Biden, and that the coming to power of Trump alters the equation in a way in which savagery will run riot, and he will take the consequences. He's prepared to do that because they're prepared to do anything once they get back into power, never to release power again, back into the hands of Americans without going through some sort of civil war. That is, to my mind, a clear signal that is driving some of this dynamic. So in part, I feel that some of it is a Biden surrender. But in other parts, I also feel it's a moral weakness, that he could not be a genuine progressive and view the world in any other way than to see that this genocide is absolutely immoral and he cannot allow it to continue. Once he takes a view that gives any succor to the people who are perpetrating this, as far as I'm concerned, he's not fit to be part of humanity. So I just miss him completely. But I would not underestimate the role that Netanyahu is trying to play in playing off Trump against Biden implicitly in what he does. He doesn't have to say it out loud. But Biden knows the Americans can't give him up. Not Biden, I mean, Netanyahu knows. They can't give him up without giving up the Middle East. And they're not going to give it up. And if Trump comes to power, a lot of these problems, look what he did with the capital. Without even thinking through it, he just changed the location of the capital. I nearly said he's a madman, but it's even worse than that, because there's a logic to that insanity. So it's not complete madness. So I think that I fear the dangers that we are seeing are what Lloyd likes to see, the contradictions playing themselves out. And maybe it's time to surrender to them and let them lead a new division or new phase in history, rather than trying to act in a way in which we try to work through them and win something for humanity or for the side of progressive. That is what sometimes I feel. I would also note that, I don't know, maybe it was announced today, so everybody should know that the people from Britain were not the Irish have joined the case with the South Africans.
Yes.
That decision was taken today.
Yes. And that is significant.
Significant, it is.
Very significant that the Irish have joined that case with the South Africans. Yeah. Yeah. Your take on the United Nations Committee hearings?
Yeah, I've been looking at them because it's something that we used to do in Sarah. We had to do because it's an annual exercise. And it's an annual grilling. And my feeling was that they were never attended to or paid attention to seriously. But it's part of the collective drive of trying to improve accountability among all nations under the hubris of the United Nations towards what is considered to be sacrosanct sacrosanct in the United Nations Convention on Human Rights. And that is a process that is taking place, or took place in Washington recently. And what also happens at the regional and national level. Because springing out of that, there are a number of border commissions that we have to, with Brazil, with the Caribbean region, with the wider Caribbean outside of CARICOM, and so forth, and lots and lots of training. I would say almost any minute of the day,
Yeah.
at least 10 or 12 training courses going on.
Before I go over to Gerald, and I'm posing this question to all of you, I know, the grilling of the Guyana government, their partisan responses to it. But do you think, in a general way, it is good for governance and accountability in Guyana?
Yes, I do. I feel it should be not part of the normal political process. And it's part of the UN evolution. As an institution, the UN is trying to grow. And to grow, it has to grow its constituents. And to grow its constituents, it has to walk the path of education, awareness, consciousness of responsibility, and so forth. So I really endorse that type of training. Some of the best people I know tend to those types of professions because they try to contribute to a better world.
Gerald?
First, let me comment on what President Ramotar said earlier about APAC. APAC is a very powerful lobbying group. And I think a number of years ago, there was a book that came out. I'm not sure, but I think the title was The Charged Conspiracy. And that book showed how the Zionist lobby in APAC use their influence and their power to destroy a lot of progressive congressmen and women who spoke out against what Israel was doing. And that's why you have many congressmen and women who are silent on Israel. But those people who are silent will open their mouth when it comes to other countries, and so that's the hypocrisy and the double standards. I think they had Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. APAC went for her and the neocons. The neocons, irrespective of whether Democrats are in or Republicans are in, the neocons are very powerful. And my take on it is that if for example, if the Democratic Party enters the elections with Biden as the presidential candidate, they will definitely lose. Trump is going to win. I don't want to see a Trump victory, but I was also shocked to listen from very seasoned activists and Pan-Africanists in the United States telling me that you will be shocked to know the amount of Africans in the United States who are supporting Donald Trump. There's even one group called itself Pan-Africanists for Trump.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, that's sickening. Anyhow, as President Ramotar pointed out, what is happening, what Israel is doing there, and they're planning, they're going to go into Rafah. If that is not naked fascism, then what is fascism? But you know what is sad? Because someone touched on this some time ago. There was a time when you had Israel went, I think it was the 7-day war, when they went to war with Syria and them, and they seized the Golan Heights. You had those Arab armies who were very nationalistic, and there were some countries who sent fighters. Today, the Arab armies, they're well equipped. Saudi Arabia spent billions on weaponry and planes, fighter planes and weapons they buy from the United Kingdom and the US. And they're all standing by and watching this genocide continuing before our eyes. And the only people who have thrown up outside of the occupied territories who are come to the support, to extend some concrete support to the Palestinians, is the Ansar Allah, or better known as the Houthi fighters in Yemen. And we know that Saudi Arabia used a lot. Saudi Arabia was bombing. Saudi Arabia was in Yemen with the full backing of the British. The British intervened to put down a popular uprising in Bahrain, because Bahrain is predominantly Shia Muslims, but the ruling elite are Sunnis. And Britain intervened to suppress that rebellion during the period of the so-called Arab Spring. And you know, we live in a world where we have all of this double standards and hypocrisy, and certain countries and institutions can get away with it. On the issue of the United Nations human rights mission on Guyana, and so, you know, David, my position is this. Of course, we subscribe and we endorse these global international bodies and institutions that we are members of. But I always believe that when it comes to our national affairs, I am strong about certain organizations interfering on behalf of some party. For example, when the free and fair elections, when the run up to the elections, when Mr. Hoyt entered into elections that he lost against Dr. Jagan, and people were pushing for certain things to be involved in, I objected to it, although I did not like Mr. Hoyt's politics. I think on the issue of handling contradictions, we need to understand what's primary and secondary contradictions, because once you invite certain forces to meddle in your domestic affairs, right? Where does it stop? And I think that we have to strengthen our institutions. I think the whole thing about accountability and transparency. So I think we need civil society and organizations and political organizations who constitute the opposition need to get our people involved. Need to get our people involved at a very mass level to know what is happening in our country, rather than people just throwing back and believe that some external force is going to solve our problems, whether it's about grilling the vice president or asking the minister on governance about a number of things. Because many of those people who are prepared to grill certain people in Guyana, they have no moral right to do so. And when I mention and I talk about things like that, somebody said, well, you are advancing the argument that Mr. Jack Dio is advancing. No. When it comes to, I am very principled on certain things. I'm a patriot, I'm a nationalist, and I hate certain institutions meddling in our national affairs, because once you encourage them to do it, then there is no stopping it. And we participated in 2015 regional and general elections, and I saw the meddling hand of a foreign diplomat. I saw it, and I wrote about it. I spoke out about it, and the editor of that newspaper was roasted fit. And now, since we were in newspapers, you know, we had this march and protest. There was 2 marches in solidarity with Palestine. President Ramotar spoke at the last one. And the Kaichur News and all the other papers carry the march and what some of the speakers said. And one newspaper never covered it. They didn't carry photographs or they didn't carry pictures. And I was told from a very good, very confidential, very reliable source that a foreign ambassador told an editor, the editor of a newspaper, not to cover that pro-Palestinian solidarity march.
Pro-Palestinian Solidarity March. Gerald Pereira taking a strong nationalist position in relation to the United Nations Human Rights Committee. And of course, the view that he expresses here is a view that is shared by sections of the local population and international community. Rohit Kanhai, as I come back to you, your comments on the same issue of the United Nations Committee and the hearings, what it means for governance in Guyana and by extension the Caribbean. And while you're at it, what's happening in Haiti? what's happening in Haiti? I come to you with those two questions and then to President Ramotar.
David, the question of Gaza heavily involves the role of the UN, how it mediates and arbitrates in any national affairs. Now, the flurry of visitors to Guyana has to do with the oil resources and the importance of Guyana in international affairs, the position that our representative took on the Security Council. So there's a whole set of events coming together. Gaza, our oil resources, as well as our local politics. Now, how are we going to mediate the oil resources in our local politics? How is the race relations in Guyana going to affect our economic distribution of wealth? Gaza gives us insight that when we don't respect each other at a racial level and we see each other in a certain way, as is in Gaza, the Israelis refer to Palestinians as animals and give them the right to destroy them. They don't even regard them as human beings. It should force us in Guyana to look at each other and have some mutual respect for each other in terms of race relations, in terms of resource allocations, and a rethinking of how to humanize our very society. And I think Brother Gerald was saying that we should look at our indigenous institutions to begin to form a basis for the democratization of the society. But when you look at the polarization of Guyana, the question is, foreign forces did serve a role in mediation, especially in Guyana electoral process. Now, the question is, have we brought our institutions to a point where we can do it in a fair manner? And we have to take responsibility for that. The most glaring case to me is our oil resources. Without oil resources, we are fighting over the crumbs. Now we have resources that we can share and raise the society to a more humane level. And instead of seeing that as the first inspirational movement, we are fighting over the oil resources, who should hog most of it for themselves. So we have to see international institutions as serving our interests at one level, serving other interests at another level. So there's too many things we have to begin to look at and begin to take responsibility for ourselves, which was the struggle for independence, that we must control our own destiny. And the question is, how much have we matured from the independence movement to where we are now? And we still have to answer that question in our political affairs. As a matter of fact, Gaza does raise the issue, do we want a unified Palestine? Do we want a two-state solution? That should have a lot of resonance in Guyanese politics. How do we mediate the struggle between the races, the resource question? So Gaza is really staring us in the face at every level, even at our institutional levels.
How does the hearings fit into all of this?
I am not very familiar with that particular aspect, David. I don't want to
Okay.
pretend I know.
All right, let's go over to Donald Ramotar. Donald, you heard Rohit there
Yeah.
taking a position
Oh,
of the
for-
fusion
for-
of the fusion of
right.
the domestic with the balancing of the domestic with the international.
Right.
Some deviation from Gerald's position. Over to you.
Well, first, let me deal with the hearings that you brought into the discussion on Gaza. But let me say that this is something that we signed into to the United Nations to be involved in these issues, and therefore the United Nations got a right to do what they're doing for that. But what is clear to me, though, however, that the bodies are influenced a lot by non-governmental type of organization. I'm not saying political parties necessarily, but a lot of non-governmental organizations. And therefore, when we talk about the issue of transparency, I believe that transparency must transcend government. And we should probably adopt a position like the United States have adopted as far as non-governmental organizations are concerned. And we must know who fund these organizations. We must know, because, for instance, I know 2 years ago that the EU gave the APA more than $100 million, and that is not known to the public. So I think that we have a right to know where a lot of these non-governmental organizations that we have, some of them calling themselves environmentalists and all of that, we need to know where they're getting their funding from and who they are really representing in our society. Are they representing any force within Guyana, or are they singing for their supper and for their existence by collecting money? There are some people in our country seems to have specialized themselves in creating non-governmental organizations and hitching themselves to some international bodies to get funding and to probably tell them what they like. Because a lot of the issues that have been raised by the government, to my mind, are some of them are unfair. For instance, this question about the appointment of the Chief Justice and the Chancellor. That has come about because of the PPP after the 1997 elections, looking to create proper conditions, agreed when you had that Constitutional Reform Commission to say that the opposition and the government must agree on instead of, as the rest of the Caribbean, as the rest of the Commonwealth, and as the rest of the world, I would say, where those positions are appointed by the president after consultation with the opposition. We put in our constitution that we must have an agreement with that, and that is one of the reasons we are in the crisis that we're in. And to blame the government for not appointing these people is, to my mind, extremely unfair. I can remember when I was president, when I invited the then opposition leader, David Granger, to consult on the matter. I told him, well, look, you have two men, Carl Singh and Ian Chang. They have been acting for 8 years. You have not made the PNC or any opposition party or any group in Guyana have not made a single complaint about their ruling, and I suggest that we appoint them. And he just said no, without any explanation or any reason why he's objecting to these people. I said, well, nobody has complained about their judgment. And therefore, if they have been acting for 8 years, I don't have any other nominee to give you. How can I say that these people are not performing well when there was not a question to their judgment that they had, and you don't want to appoint them? But how now can you blame the government for this? I think what we should do is advocate a change in the constitution to go back to what the rest of the Caribbean is doing, because it's not a nice situation. It's a very bad situation for everyone, so that you can have, after proper consultation, the appointment of these people, these positions in the government itself. I found myself in a very awkward position because I said, these people have done nothing wrong. They were working for 8 years. They have been producing. They have ruled in favor of the government and against the government. What is the reason to say that they're not suitable? I had no answer to that. And the other issues that have been raised, I think that I'm glad that coming out of this, there will be an inquiry into the crime period, the period of 2002 to 2008, 2007, 2008. I'm glad that the government has agreed to set up. I think the government never wanted to set it up before because they thought all of these things were clear, that they had information and so forth from the police, and these matters were clear. And now with this, I think it's good, and we to put these things to bed, because a lot of the propaganda, to my mind, was false, and was damaging to our country, to say some of these things. So let us have an inquiry and put it to bed, and I would agree with that.
Former President Donald Ramotar there. Professor Thomas.
Oh, let me also say this. Coming back to the Gaza situation, I think that what is also facing us squarely in our face. I mean, of course, as Clive mentioned, Guyana is a small country and we don't have the kind of clout as the big country. But it's very clear that we are facing a crisis of leadership in the West. There's a tremendous crisis of leadership in the West. Europe has become a practical, Europe, which used to have some type of balancing effect on Americans, sometimes excesses. They have become practical colony of the United States. Imagine they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Europe is saying not a word about it. They're covering it up. These are the people who tell us all the things about transparency, but they don't want an investigation covering it up. They tell us about environment, and that was the worst environmental disaster ever. There was never at one time so much of CO2 released into the atmosphere as the blowing up of the Nord Stream 2 pipelines. But that is all of that is being covered up. And it seems to me that the quality of leadership in the West is terribly wanting. I mean, imagine that Schultz stood at the side of Biden, and when Biden said in Nord Stream 2, we will put an end to it, and he said nothing. And what is happening to Germany now? There's a deindustrialization of Germany taking place, with all of German factories going to the United States because of the shortage of the price of energy. So I would say this is a crisis in leadership. You don't have the quality of, even though Kennedy shafted Guyana in the past, I still think on a global level, he was more sensitive to world peace than what we're seeing happening here today.
Professor Thomas, Gerald raised the question of meddling by international institutions. Rohit Kanhai and President Ramotar talks about a balance between international obligations and domestic, or what Gerald calls a nationalist position. Where you stand on that issue?
I stand in the same position as both of them. I personally believe that a lot of the issues that we are faced with, a lot of bluster passes for fact. I did an informal survey at a seminar I was at, a Zoom seminar a few weeks ago, as to which global leader stands out, not as an active persuader, but as representing more forcefully than any other forces against the use of oil and gas, carbon-emitting fuels. And the majority of people, 7 to 8 out of 10, said Biden. I said, tell me which country over the last 6 years have produced the most oil and gas ever in the history of the world. Not one of them mentioned Biden. And he's on record as having created that record for 6 successive years. I think I mentioned it to you on the last program we had. Yeah. Biden has produced more gas and oil than any other person in the history of the world, any other leader. And he has a reputation as being a champion for low carbon fuels, replacing oil and gas, the electric car and all that. So the gap between fact and fiction is enormous because our people just don't read. It's like I was reading Kaito News the other day, and they're lamenting and cussing down the government because they have not given an estimate of how much oil and gas we have. Yet this very government, in their paper, they advertised what the government put in their advertisement was the amount of gas reserve, oil and gas reserves that we had, that we were putting up for auction. Right there in the same paper, they're printing every day. And did that been the headline for 2 days?
Professor Clive Thomas, they're pointing out some glaring inconsistencies. I can tell you that the close to 1,500 people on this live tonight they may not be reading, but this is more than reading. They are live participants on a very informative program. I think these programs, have moved from social media now to really mainstream media, and with participation by people in direct ways. And before I bring in Gerald to wrap things up tonight, I want to say we were commended, and I had not thought about it that way, but we were commended for bringing together a panel like this that is, of course, ethnically balanced, but also politically balanced, because people come from different political persuasions, but that we could have a civil conversation, that people are informed at the end of it. And clearly, our audience here is a partisan audience, but they're well behaved. I mean, you can read the comments and you can see here. So we may be making some progress, UI, I think, in informing our citizenry, and trying to make fact more of a fact than fiction. But your point is well taken. Gerald Pereira, Pan-Africanist, internationalist, you get the chance to comment on anything.
Let me quickly say something that you just meant in relation to what you said. Although we might have different political allegiances and so, I think ideologically we're in the same wavelength. I think everyone here have a track record for being anti-imperialist and they're all patriots. And I think that we all have another thing we have in common is that we're all opposed to neoliberal economics and the plunder of our country's resources by foreign corporations that are rooting this place and are not really putting anything back into it. I think we agree on that. Ideologically, we stand there to the left. But I just want to say this, that, two things I want to mention and get out here because it's important. For years, those who planned and executed the Air Cubana bombing were based in the United States. And countries, we tried to get those individuals to be extradited. Cuba wanted extradition. So was it North Korea, the DPRK, and Guyana under President Bonham did. And those, the mastermind of those of that Air Cubana terrorist act lived in the United States until they passed away by the natural causes, and they were protected. This is what we are talking about. They protected those persons. In fact, it is well documented that when they planted the bomb and they got to Barbados and they checked into the hotel, the first place they called was the U.S. Embassy. And then when they left the U.S. Embassy, they went back to the hotel, checked out, and went to another hotel, then out. Anyhow, that's that. The other thing is, do you know that when President Obama was trying to soften up the American position towards Cuba. I think there was a misreading on the part of the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Health in St. Vincent. So he ordered a drug that the Cubans produced. The Cubans got this drug that you can use for people people who got diabetic feet. You can reverse the process. They inject the feet, the foot, and you can reverse the process. So there is no need anymore for amputation. So St. Vincent ordered about 350,000 US worth of the drug. And the money went through a corresponding bank in the United States. The US government held on to St. Vincent money for 10 months. And they had to fight to get that money back. So while they held on to the money, you had young people and the elderly who were losing their legs, is being amputated because of the illegal and immoral blockade that the United States has imposed on Cuba. And this drug is available. And yet, we don't have access to it because of the sanctions. So I am mentioning this to you because these people come into this country and they lecture us. They'll tell us about freedom and democracy and all of this. And we have people who listen to them. That's why I don't show up at certain things, because I would use very unparliamentary language when speaking to them. I did this at the Umanayana to the Exxon people. I told them, I said what I had to say, and the Stabrook said if a pin had dropped in there, you could have heard it. Right? I tell them what I had to say, and they need to be told. But there are people who will pussyfoot with them and play up to them. But there comes a time when somebody got to call them out for who they are. I know that we have mainstream politicians who are the mainstream, and you will be careful with your language and you are more measured. I am not. And the older I get, I don't think I'm softening. I think I'm getting worse. I'm getting harder.
Gerald Pereira.
Getting wiser.
And in fairness, Gerald, I have to give the other panelists 1 minute each to make whatever comment they want to make as we close off what I think has been quite an informative program. Rohit Kanhai, former President Donald Ramotar, and Professor Clive Thomas, in that order.
David, I think the Gaza situation will define the stage of humanity, because given the resolution, we are still at the point where the ceasefire resolution is only up to the end of Ramadan, which the time is almost running out on us. So what happens in Rafah will define what stage of humanity we are at this point in time.
Rohit, can I there? President Ramotar?
I would say that it has already defined who we are, because I think that the resolution that was passed at the United Nations should be complied with, and even before that, from a sheer humanitarian point of view, to bomb a civilian population the way and to destroy a civilian population the way the people in Gaza have been subjected to is really inhuman. That's why I said it's naked fascism. Starving people, killing people, shooting people with snipers, killing doctors, killing the United Nations workers, killing journalists to prevent information from getting out of what is taking place there. And to continue to sell this regime weapons, to continue the massacre that is taking place, I don't know what else we want to define anything. Those countries who are there. And if I may introduce something that is new here, and maybe we should have a discussion on it sometime in the future. It is not without significance to note that all the forces that support Israel in this genocidal activity are the very forces that are supporting the Zelensky regime in Ukraine in the proxy war against Russia. And that, to my mind, is not insignificant.
Correct.
President Ramotar. C.Y. Thomas, the elder and professor, you have the very last word. Well, second to last.
I cannot find any words to describe what I feel now at this point in time. I had hoped that Donald might have had some insights that could help me navigate this horror that I'm witnessing at this point in time. But I think no words can do that. It's an unspeakable horror. And rather than just being futile and throw my hands up in the air, I still think that we can rely on the fact, or we have to rely on the fact, that contradictions will emerge and they will play themselves out. And we have to look for the opportunities that can make it possible to build a better world.
To build a better world. And as we speak about Gaza, we have our own crisis in our region, Haiti. We did not get to it tonight, but the next time you guys get a call from me, we are going to begin with Haiti, because we cannot ignore what's happening in Haiti. In many regards, what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Haiti are related to each other. I just want to thank you all again for answering the call for this discussion. Every now and again, we have to take what the Americans call timeout to deal with the larger issues. And those larger issues affect us, especially as we move gingerly, and Professor Thomas may say even more than gingerly, into the era of the petrol state. Martin Carter says, all are involved, are consumed. We Guyanese, we are now involved in geopolitics again. We were there beginning, if you were in the 1950s, there might have been moments when it was cool, but we were always part of that global mix. And again, Carter says, all are involved, all are consumed. We are involved, and we will be consumed if Gaza is not solved and if Haiti is not solved. So I just want to leave with that word. Gentlemen, thank you, Rohit.
David, just before,
yes,
sorry, David, just before you go quickly, yes, Clive is right. Another world is possible. I just want to tell you that while we commend the Guyana government for their position, there is an organization called the Guyana Action for Palestine. It's a lot of young people, and there are a number of organizations working with them, and they're calling for the Guyana government to do like Belize, to break all cultural, all diplomatic and trade links with Israel, especially with the LR group that is behind this dairy project. So they've sent a letter to DDL about this, about what is happening in Gaza and so, because if DDL does not take a particular position, there's a call for the boycott of DDL products. And so the BDS, which is the boycott, the BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is on in Guyana.
They send me something by email.
Yes.
Or WhatsApp.
Gerald,
you can get it through David.
Yes, I'll send it. Yes, I'll pass it on to you.
Please pass it on to me. And
yes,
please, if you
it's
can,
a number of young people, and I think there's some of your former colleagues, some of the women who were once associated with the WP and so, or still they're involved too.
Okay.
No, I didn't mean that way, but some of they're still active.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and gentlemen.
And Donald, I look forward to the book tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. I'll send it to you tomorrow. I'll call you and send it to you.
And again, Rohit Kanhai, executive member of the WPA, Donald Ramotar, former president of Guyana and PPP stalwart, Gerald Pereira, Organization for the Victory of the People, leader, and Pan-Africanist, and Professor Clive Thomas, who I'm sure to this audience needs no introduction. Gentlemen, thank you all very much.
Thank you, David.
And to you, the audience, again, we can never do this without you. And I keep saying that when the history of this period is written, you all will be in the front seat. Tomorrow night, Dr. Vincent Adams is going to be here, and Apostle London are going to be here as we come back to domestic affairs. Until tomorrow night, I'll see you all. And remember always, the watchword is what? Love, love, love.